All right, comrades.
बहुत पूरा
Uh,
दो तीन दिन इधर बस दो तीन
sorry about that. Hi, comrades. Welcome to everybody to this meeting. We've had Comrade Aman speaking to us several times over the last few years about the developing struggle in Iran. We've heard from him about the huge strike wave that took place 2 or 3 years ago. We saw some very exciting videos of factory gate meetings. We heard from him later during the inspiring women's movement against the medieval theocratic rules of the ruling regime. And we heard from him at the beginning of the outbreak of the horrific wars and the extermination of the Palestinian population of Gaza and the attacks on Iran. Now we have a situation where I would imagine we'll hear from Comrade Oman that the balance of forces may be temporarily dipped in a different direction. There was a horrific attack of the bombing raids on Tehran and a big wave of repression by the regime. I think what we're all very much thirsting to hear from Comrade Oman is the mood and the resilience of the population of Iran. What do you think the balance of forces are now, and what are the perspectives for for the future of the revolutionary process? So I'll hand over straight away now to Comrade Oman. Um, Over to you.
Thank you very much, Roger, and good afternoon to you, everybody. Well, good evening if you're a little bit further away. The situation that we are seeing now is after the so-called 12-day war. Interestingly enough, it's very, perhaps sometimes easy to just have one situation as one war and have one solution to any war. But sadly, that doesn't work. It's not possible to just have one war and therefore all wars are different. Not necessarily, but a lot of times they're different to one another. And therefore the policies and obviously the main focus at any one stage would have to change. When you look at the situation of the recent war that took place and was about 12 days, some said, oh, Iran had had a war with Iraq for over 8 years with over 1 million dead through that war and through that period. And then you could look at the war that took place as the Gulf War or the war that is taking place in Gaza. All of these are wars, but obviously the focus of each one is different. So one way of recognizing each war is to find out what is generally said is the violent continuation of previous policies in a different manner. Recognize what are the reasons for this war, how it came about, and at the same time recognize the main issues that have come during this war, and therefore what should be the main policies that socialists and working class should adopt accordingly. There is one thing to bear in mind, and that is insofar as the recent war of the 12 days took place, it's impossible to actually talk about this war without looking at the whole Middle East. The situation that Israel is in, the isolation that it feels, the escalation of the war to Gaza, from Gaza to Lebanon, from Lebanon to Syria, and then to Iran and all the rest, and the situation that Israel is in on one hand, and what they actually had termed, or what Netanyahu had termed, as the new Middle East order, along rhyming with the new order that George Bush, if you remember, brought out when he was talking about the Gulf War. And the idea was that the reason effectively was given as the issue of nuclear or what is termed as the nuclearization, if you like, of Iran and its attempt of the Islamic Republic to find atomic bombs, and therefore, given the policies of Iran, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, therefore Israel has no choice but to go over and effectively break down this situation completely and change the whole scenario. This was the rhetoric that we heard a lot about from Netanyahu, and I think probably in majority of cases, if you look at the official media, followed on the same pattern. And they made it sound as if the issue was the issue of nuclears and nuclear or atomic bomb, if you like, of Iran. And everybody knew that that is not really the main issue. This was effectively one of those red herring which was brought out, like the weapons of mass destruction of Saddam Hussein at the time when the Gulf War was going on. So the rhetoric was very much similar to that time. Not only the name of the new Middle East order, but also the rhetoric was very similar to that era. The situation of Israel, and obviously the question that we had always was that not the case of the issue is that of the nuclear issue of Iran, but the issue was mostly acceptance of the, if you like, the gendarme role of Israel and the issue of nuclear power that Israel has. That was the main issue, and nobody else was supposed to have in that region any form of or any means of actually having something similar. The idea was to make sure that Israel, and at the moment, as we all know, the situation of Netanyahu's government, the continuation of war and further escalation of the war as the only means of it staying in power to a large extent and pursuing its policy and forcing the rest of the countries, even the reactionary states in the Gulf and the rest of the Middle East, to follow and recognize Israel as the only force that can do anything he wants without any impunity, and he can carry on doing so for as long as he wants and being effectively the main, if you like, military power and the main decider in the whole Middle East. This was not going to work. The situation, or if you like, the turnout during the attack and after the attack on Iran by Israel showed that that is not going to actually work. The position, if you like, or the ability and the power base have shifted massively since the early 90s, where we had the first Gulf War. The situation in each of the countries in the region is very much different to what it was. The situation in Iran, obviously, is very different. And the position of Israel is very, very different to what it was before. And we all saw how the regional powers from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and if you go further down the line towards Jordan and all the rest, they were all trying to actually say something that if there is any war, and if the war does escalate towards Iran, the whole situation of the Middle East would be in a different, unknown fate. And this fate is something that they cannot decide. It wasn't just because of what the Islamic Republic can do, which I would come back a little bit later to, but it was the whole region and the positions, which are very different to what it was before. We saw the first instances that US in particular had to give in to the states in the region. And one of the first signs of that was under the, if you like, the guise of bringing Syria to the Abraham Accord. And the idea was allowing, or if you like, loosening the embargo that they had and giving the free reins to Saudi Arabia as one of the advantageous points, if you like, to the region in terms of the positions that they have and the expectations that they have. Most of the states in the region are not looking for further militarization, not militarization, but further, if you like, instability in the region. And all of them have set up their future based on some way of actually improving their own position. The bourgeoisie in all of these countries is in not the same position that it was before. It is in a very much, if you like, underhanded position from the point of view of the expectations of the general population in the region. And this situation of further war and further instability and not knowing what would be the outcome was something that none of them wanted. And this was shown clearly by a variety of the heads of the states and their spokespeople in the region saying that they do not want to see a further escalation of this war towards Iran. And Israel attack was therefore this time very clearly stated, started with the first rhetoric of the issue of nuclear, but very soon it became clear and publicly said by Netanyahu and a variety of his ministers that what they want is a change of government, a regime change in Iran. And that was their intention. The attack was orchestrated. It covered a variety of areas. The bombing went across many different cities, from the south, from the west mostly, north, and also part of east of Iran. But the whole idea was to try and actually do two things. The initial idea was to kill some of the heads of the military, but it wasn't just a case of direct sort of sniper attack. It was a case of bombings. And it went further to the infrastructure. It even included the bombing of the notorious Evin prison in Iran and the killing of some of the people who were even in the area and not just the prison. And it went on further and further, like blowing up the fuel tanks that people were going to use later on, etc. Everything was supposed to create a chaos. And this chaos was supposed to have opened up the ground for a handover from the part of the bourgeois opposition, if you like, mostly from the right wing in Iran and their contacts inside Iran, to actually be able to force a regime change. Everybody knew from advance that the regime change would not take place through bombings. That would not happen. Everybody knew that the Islamic Republic is also very different to Saddam Hussein's regime, or if you like, the most recent ones, like the issue of Hezbollah that they went after in Lebanon. We have seen over some 21 months, Israel has bombarded and devastated the whole of Gaza, and still they have to sit down and talk to Hamas. In Iran, the Islamic Republic is not like any of those. It's been in power for almost 47 years. It has come to power through crushing of a mass popular uprising. It has got a variety of different structures within the society, and irrespective of its impasse economically or politically, it is still in power and it has a broad range of apparatus. So the change or regime change in Iran would not take place the same way as regime change by bombing could happen, if you like, even elsewhere. Two, the idea of military action and presence of the armed forces as ground troops was never going to be an issue that could be done in a country which is 5 times the size of France and has got a population of almost 80 odd million people. And therefore, the idea of regime change was changed to one thing else. The regime change was changed to two parts. One was to bring in an alternative, and I mean by the alternative specifically one type of alternative that would actually take a change or handing of the power, one that it is more pro-US, or if you like, in line with Israel, or at least not in opposition to them. Two, banking on a variety of tribal forces that some have been more recently been armed and effectively escalated their presence through their reactionary forces in the region. That was another part. This is from the northwest to the southeast of Iran. And thirdly was the idea of the mayhem. And this was the notion that was taking place. And the right-wing opposition in Iran hailed it. We saw them all in the marches that was against or condemnation of Israel. We saw their flags alongside the flags of Israel standing at the corner. and they were dancing and they were calling for more bombings and hoping, or at least pushing the idea that if the war takes place, the Islamic Republic would be under pressure. This is its worst situation. And as a result, it would be open for people to come up and take power. And we all knew, at least insofar as the working class and, if you like, the mass movement in Iran was concerned, that this is not going to be the case. First of all, the bombings would mean devastation. We've seen how the bombings in Syria, Libya, etc., have ended up. Society was not going to sit back and let Iran become what Iraq was at the time or Syria was at the time. They were not the general political situation in Iran, and the consciousness that is existing in the country to a large extent is more on the basis of the left. And when I say on the basis of the left, I mean in general terms, in terms of the expectations of freedom, rights, wanting of the councils, etc. That was widespread. And it's not just a political change, but an economic change that it is being called for. And in this situation, the growing movement that was taking place in Iran was something that the Islamic Republic, just before the situation of this war, was finding itself in a different position. It had to backtrack, it had to give concessions, and therefore, soon as the war took place, immediately after, the idea was that this is going to be devastation. So what a lot of the Western media translated this as, and I mean Western media in terms of general official media, from Al Jazeera to the rest, to the BBC, Sky, and all the American sides, all they tried to say that because of this war, people have rallied around their flag, which was not the case. It was against the devastation that this war would have brought. And that this was what was really happening. And this devastation was something that everybody knew is coming. Everybody knew in a country where it has got problems already in terms of its economy, bombing of some of the infrastructure, bombing of some of the factories, etc., is not going to improve their economic situation. Everybody would be in a worse situation, especially because the currency would be devalued immediately, which it was, and consequently the cost of living goes up, and the situation for everyone would become worse. The protest that took place, or if you like, the idea that took place was that this situation is not acceptable. This had nothing to do with the Islamic Republic or rallying around the flag. It wasn't patriotism or nationalism, but it was the general opposition to this situation which was taking place in Iran. But soon as the war effectively started to escalate, and then immediately after, once the ceasefire has been brought, and it's better to note that there is no peace, if you like, it's just a ceasefire. And therefore the threat of the war is still on there. The immediate response was, insofar as Israel was concerned, insofar as the US was concerned, Islamic Republic was concerned, everybody started saying we are the winners. Everybody could see that the idea of regime change has completely failed. Everybody could see that the excuse of nuclear issue doesn't hold water, whether from the point of view of the non-proliferation treaty requirements, and nor from the point of view of the position of the nuclear issue in the whole region. Everybody knew that's just an excuse, and that's not really the main issue that is actually being tackled in here. And everybody started saying they're the victorious part. But what happened was, out of this, or immediately after the 12 days, every one of these powers tried to actually make the most to show that it has got a better position. The Islamic Republic tried to actually raise the flag of nationalism and patriotism against anybody who actually did anything. Charges of any help would be considered, or any protest against the Islamic Republic could be considered as a rallying aligned with Israel, and therefore that was used. Immediately the laws were changed. Special courts have been set up. The idea that anybody who says anything about the Islamic Republic become an ally of Israel would mean an immediate sentencing and death penalty. The number of imprisonments went up immediately after. Harsh condition in terms of any opposition voices were raised within the country in terms of immediate suppression, militarization in variety of places of general life and workplaces suddenly escalated. And this was the answer that the Islamic Republic had. And they were trying to actually build on this, and still are trying to build on this and spread any form of protest and unity that was in the country. Over the years, one of the things that the Islamic Republic has been doing, and part of the, if you like, a general policy or fascistic policy or racist policies that have been taking place in Iran, has been the notion that the Afghan refugees in Iran are a problem. They are the ones who actually produce problems for us, if you like. This time, Islamic Republic built on that as well. The idea went so far in terms of their policy, went so far as to say, to change this and even put this one in a flag of nationalism as well. The Afghan refugees, under the notion of illegal immigrants, was used this time under the banner of non-Iranians, Iranians and non-Iranians. And as a result, the Islamic Republic passed a law that all of these people who have come from Afghanistan to Iran, several million of them, they all got to be deported. And they have started this. Currently, we are looking at daily something like 20,000 Afghan people from Afghan background are being pushed out of Iran, often without any form of support or any form of provisions. They've been taken out to busloads and taken across and transferred over to Afghanistan, a hellhole that is at the moment there. And this is taking place on a very much broader scale across the country. And what was the general population response was to say, this is not acceptable. In many places, people actually started setting up sections where they started giving refuge and shelter to the people from Afghanistan. And when I say people from Afghanistan, we're not talking about somebody who's been there for 5 months, 4 months. We have people who have been there for 20 odd years. And laws under the Islamic Republic say that if, for example, an Iranian woman marries an Afghan man, because the father is not from Iran, therefore they didn't even provide birth certificates for the children, and even the children couldn't go to school. This has now escalated massively in terms of deportations. And the local people in many areas started to take provision for them and provide shelter for them. And this is exactly the same notion we had during the war. There wasn't any help or any shelter by the Islamic Republic, but it was generally the population itself that was looking after itself. Provision of medical help, etc., grew immensely during this time. And we saw exactly the same thing as it happened during the COVID time or any earthquake or any natural disaster or floods and whatever else. All of these have been the population themselves. And that unity, again, is showing itself today here. And the Islamic Republic is trying to break that down under the banner of non-Iranians versus Iranians, if you like. And this is one of the current situations which is taking place. So immense amount of repression, separations, segregations in many instances, more attacks on women, and also militarization of many workplaces. We all knew that our situation following this war is going to be different. We all knew that any single bullet, and I think I probably have said this in the meetings here before, that any single bullet by Israel or by US on Iran extends and strengthens the Islamic Republic and gives it more excuses to attack. And this has happened. This is literally has happened, and everybody can see it. So in terms of the popular progressive revolutionary movement in Iran, this war was an attack. It did create a dent because in such a situation, it's very difficult or it's at least more difficult to do organization and gathering. Breaking down of variety of structures is something that the Islamic Republic we knew is going to bank on, and more militarization of workplaces we knew is going to actually make our job harder. So now what we have is effectively an additional problem that we didn't have before and we have today. But there is also on the other side, like every other thing, it's a major issue. And major issues means political parties take sides. And one thing which we saw in here was a huge change in terms of recognition of the right-wing opposition, in terms of their hailing and their support and their dancing in the streets, if you like, mainly abroad, in terms of welcoming the attack by Israel. And the idea that they would have enough power to call on everybody else to come and raise another uprising to drop the Islamic Republic with the help of the bombings. This clearly showed their lack of presence within Iran, their immense lack of popularity on one hand, because nothing, as they had said, took place. Two, everybody started seeing them as those who don't care for the lives of the people who are under bombardment, but more of the case that they just want to get themselves to power by any means possible. And the only means possible for them is through mayhem and devastation of the society. And three, they saw how those, if you like, within, like ourselves, like people who were actually saying that our job is to get rid of the Islamic Republic, and that's our job. And the expectation of an alternative from Israel or from US, from that point of view, is not going to be something that people are after, and therefore they would be coming for anything like that as an alternative, was boosted. So we have a recognition of this, and the recognition of the media, the right-wing media that has everywhere trying to portray the right-wing opposition as the only popular opposition, suffered greatly. So that has happened at the same time. This brings us to a current scenario. We still have protests taking place in Iran, especially after the war. The main slogans that we hear in these protests, whether we're looking at the retired and the pensioners, whether we're looking at the teachers, whether we're looking at variety of workplaces, they are actually pushing forward for one thing. And these are the main slogans that have come out in many of these places. One of them is with regard to the actions that the Islamic Republic and the bosses have taken. They say if there has been a situation where because of the war or because of the situation that has happened, they started non-payment of the wages, non-payment of the due expected wages and bonuses. None of them have been paid. The idea is that everybody says, well, by law, if the person who does the work does not turn up at work without a good reason or for whatever reason in Iran, therefore they won't get paid. This was not the case that the working people were not going to work. The situation was that the bosses decided to all run away. And therefore they have to pay for all the due wages on one hand. Two, they want an immediate end, and this is again what we see very, very broadly, an immediate end for the cessation of the executions which are taking place right, left, and center, and the abolition of the death penalty in totality of it. One thing else which we have been pushing forward was to start building some sort of a, if you like, a bloc, some sort of a general opposition to allow, or what Islamic Republic is trying to allow itself to use the situation of the war as another way to take vengeance on the people and generally workers across many different working places. And this is another area which is effectively saying the Islamic Republic is supposed to pay for all of the devastation that has happened in terms of the houses of the people, ensuring that the incomes are brought back in immediately. Extra should be paid for the situation that people are in, and the war cannot be used as a means of excuse for further attacks on their living conditions. And these are the main issues that we have. What I'm trying to say in one word is the protest movement, if you like, the causes because of the situation that everybody was in has not disappeared and has not gone away. The forces that are in power, like in Iran, the Islamic Republic, is using the issue of the war to take vengeance, and this is one thing we're seeing at the moment. Two, the Islamic Republic, Israel, and US have all taken up the pressure of possible extension or continuation of the war or another war taking place. And they're using that atmosphere to crush any form of protest. That is taking place as well. So our work has become, if you like, more difficult from that point of view. But that is a general broad view of what has happened and what is currently taking place in Iran. I'm not going to the idea of all of the talk that they have with regard whether Iran would have negotiations with US, the position that the US has, or if you like, the difficulty that the West has in actually resolving this problem, the situation of isolation of Israel, which has going to have an impact, and therefore is going to have further impacts in terms of what happens in terms of military actions that might take place. I think that could be something that we could discuss probably later on. But the situation within the country, this is what it is. And each party or if each part is trying to build on this situation to follow their own means. We are doing ours, Islamic Republic is doing his, and obviously Israel and US are pursuing theirs. And that's where we are at the moment. It's interestingly enough that the right wing that is being supported now by Israel is trying to gather the momentum with the rest of especially in Europe. We saw the son of the old Shah being called to talk with Boris Johnson, Michael Farage, having a meeting, and they said they have a closed room meeting in Parliament, and they made it as if he's addressing the Parliament in opposition to Mujahideen, which had traditionally had that position in terms of the West. So that takes place at the same time. But insofar as the general public is concerned, they have actually gone through a huge meltdown in terms of their rhetorics. Thank you. I think I better stop there. I might have taken more than your 25 minutes.
No, well, that was very interesting, Comrade Oman, and I'm sure comrades have got a lot of questions and points. So, who wants to speak first, or who has a question? Norma.
Sorry. Can I go now?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amma. Very inspiring and precise presentation. I just want to make, in view of what was written very, very well in the invitation for the meeting and your introduction, 2 points. And it appears, for all of us, as I think here and in many other places, that what you explained and presented, this war, and just excuse is not for changing of regime, and also the similarity with previous Iraq war, with nuclear reasons invented. So all that, all that is clear, in my mind. I want to make the point about the repression of, besides the bombing, because that was even worse, terrible, but the repression and the already situation in Iran under this theocratic dictature or so-called republic. It's not a republic, it's a Islamic dictatorship and so on. And so there are forces, popular forces in society, in the different levels and in the different working disciplines, say, and that they want and they are active, trying and have tried to change this regime. And they are under pressure I said elegantly, pressure, repression, and bombing now with the war. I don't take the expression 12 days war because I think it's a 12 days episode because the war have not finished in some sense. I mean, perhaps the bombing, I mean, the most terrible, but the war is there and it's very unstable, in a very unstable. So in this, I came to say, I was aware, and in fact, we translated in Militant Network in France, which I represent here, a manifesto or declaration just last month, I mean, 14 June, from Iran unity of different forces, or at least united to do that, against the war, I mean, and also expressing what you expressed, and saying that all these working class parties or Marxist or left in the wide sense need to be united and continue, I mean, and trying to develop strategies to to protect also themselves or to organize themselves, because as you have very clear said, they cannot expect from the authorities any help even for survive in some sense. All the contrary. So that was done, I mean, and is very good because we have diffused it. And at the same time, it was very good also, very good in some sense, was very clear, but worse, to see that from the left, even from our network, which is left, militant, and so, I mean, have exposed Roger, Raymond, I mean, who exposed also here and so on. Of course, he is in the same sense I am speaking. But other comrades, and even the left in France, do not want to touch the subject attacking the Islamic Republic and the Iran regime, the Islamic dictatorship and the nonsense, etc., because they said they are against Israel, and Israel is doing genocide in Gaza, and so left is not the moment. They say textually, and a great part of the left, even the more said extreme left and so on, is in this position, and they are silent about the problem of women. For instance, in France, we have three people, French people, which are in jail in Iran, and there is from Iran. I mean, I was also contacted because there is the Nobel Peace woman who feel menaced by the regime, and all that, in many places of the left in France is wanted to keep silent, and I think it's very important to stress the fact that even if the media, even if Europe, I said, in which I am, they are silent about the people, the real forces which are battling with their ideas in the universities, in the streets, or in the houses, in the working place, against the Islamist regime, dictatorship. It's very important to keep in mind and to keep, if possible, in touch, or set to, in some sense, trying to accompany or to see how much these forces can, how they can do, or do not forget, at least, that there are these very important, I think, is heroic movement, because it's terrible, it's a terrible regime, as you said. I mean, so this is the point. I mean, to really, I think, in my case, is our commitment, to uh, to make the stress, to stress, and to remark, and to make a wide, diffusion of this part of the case. Not just, of course, the bombing, the war, all that, but this part which is, in some sense, behind the media, or the bombing and the so-called war, have put it behind the news. And this, it was always, this regime, it was already there before the bombs. And it's very important to do not forget that people are fighting this regime.
Norma, sorry to
Thank you.
interrupt you.
I
Okay.
finish. Thank you
Sorry,
very
I
much.
didn't want to cut
Sorry.
you short like that, but listen, there are three comrades who want to speak. Joe and Finn, I believe that Themos has to leave early. Would you mind if I call Themos first? Okay, thanks, Themos.
Thank you, Roger, and many thanks to Aman for a very detailed and important and logical description of what is really going on. That was really something that puts things in place. From my point of view, we should also see the effect on the consciousness of the people in the area, both in Iran, but also in the Arab countries and in Palestine and in the region in general. But also the way the US has acted doesn't fit in with the normal despair that Trump can do anything he likes. What the impression, at least, that we have from the information that comes out of many unreliable or semi-reliable forces, it seems that Netanyahu was determined to attack Iran for the reasons described by Aman mainly, and for internal reasons, and also for gaining the upper hand in the whole area. But it seems that the Americans got cold feet. I mean, when Netanyahu started all this mayhem, and it seems that the Americans said, "Okay, we shall bomb the nuclear sites ourselves." And what it seems is that they wanted to bomb them safely in the sense that they wouldn't go into an all-out war with Iran. So what it seems to have happened is that they informed the Iranians what they were going to do. The Iranians managed to take out the personnel and plutonium and all this, and the Americans did quite some damage probably to the installations, but they didn't quite destroy the capabilities of Iran for nuclear research. And then what happened? The Iranians had to respond, and they notified the Americans that they would bomb their base in Qatar, so that the Americans would take out their personnel and not have any human losses. And all this, it gave we could see a picture that the whole thing of American-Iran clash was a choreographed in order to de-escalate what was going on. It seems that the limits of American capabilities had been reached. And also, we know that despite all this, Netanyahu tried to send the Air Force to bomb Tehran. And Trump was mad at him, and they ordered him to turn the planes back, which he did. I don't know how much of this is true or not, but this is what is the impression in the whole area, which seems to me that it puts an end to the myth that the Iranian regime is the great supporter of the Palestinian people. And this, not immediately, but I think that as time passes, it will have a real effect in the countries of the area, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Egypt, and I don't know whether the whole region can be as stable as it was before this war in the near future. So I think this is very important to have in mind. There is this upgrading of Israel's apparent strength, but there is also a realization that it has limits. So the whole situation could really unravel, and the American control of the area and the Israeli hegemony in the area is not as stable as it could be.
Okay, thank you, Thammo. Next is Joe.
Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Aman, for a very clear outlining of the situation that faces the Iranian people. Don't know what to say. It's pretty bleak, especially when you consider that it was already difficult enough for the opposition, and now it's even more difficult for the opposition. I am absolutely aware that when we talk about international support, when we're talking about it as socialists, we would orientate naturally towards the international working class to see what can be done. But we need to look outside of that as well, in that there's not an awful lot can be done in that situation, bar resolutions being passed and so on, and maybe a very odd piece of isolated action in support of the opposition inside Iran. But in the situation we have now, I'm just wondering about the opposition that you say exists inside Iran, quite apart from the women's movement, quite apart from the fact that there are trade unions that operate. Is there an opposition? Is that split in a few different ways? Do some of them orientate towards, in the same way as the PLO did, they try to sort of make progress in the United Nations? Is there a wing that looks to try to get some sort of international statements from the likes of countries which allegedly support the Iranians, like China, where in the Western media all the time it's China and Iran are mentioned in the same breath. But yet, unless there's been a media blackout on that, I haven't seen much coming from the Chinese in relation to taking a strong stance against the American bombing. I'm sure they issued a perfunctory statement, but there was no great outrage, no great threat emerging from China or upping of the stakes in relation to what was going on. Equally, the other Arab countries, they all obviously condemned the bombing and so on, but we're not getting any sense of anything other than those Arab states being clientele states of Western imperialism, as they always were. Then we have an emerging bloc of countries called the BRICS, which includes China, obviously. They're emerging with a separate identity in relation to their economic needs, but we're not seeing any kind of international gelling of a consensus in relation to the power situation. For example, they don't seem to be focusing whatsoever in really asserting themselves in relation to Gaza or in relation to the bombing of Iran and so on. So what I'm asking then is there a wing of the Iranian opposition? It may be the bourgeois wing, it may be the student wing, whatever, that are looking towards, in the same way as the PLO did, to try to make progress in relation to the United Nations, make progress in relation to China, make progress in relation to building up allies so that it becomes a bit more diplomatically difficult for the Americans to get away with renewing or ending the ceasefire and starting another escapade 3-6 months from now when the mood takes them. I asked that question in despair because I don't really see the chances of creating international solidarity amongst the working class on behalf of the Iranians, unless a war broke out and was in situ for some months. Then you would get, obviously, an anti-war movement would grow in the West. But and then the final question I'll ask is in relation to the women's movement, and the comments by Norma really are, again, slightly bleak in that this thing where they maintain now is not the moment and we have to present to keep that for another day. I would imagine that whatever number of women's organizations we can get to stand behind the women's campaign inside Iran, that those should now assert themselves as much as ever and seek to broaden their campaign out. Because unless that becomes the cause of women's organizations in the UK, in Ireland, everywhere, the issue of women being stoned, of being imprisoned, all these things create horrors when they're reported on in Ireland and so on, but there's never any response by the women's organizations. And I think what would break the logjam would be if some organizations that of any significance inside France or Spain or wherever took a position that they were going to create an absolute stink about this, and also look for solidarity from other women's organizations across Europe, that I think they would get a response. But it's a question of them having an orientation to doing that, and doing that over a year or two. But the work has to start somewhere, because it's not enough for just organizations of women to focus on their own countries and so on. They're going to have to develop that international perspective as well. So yeah, so I'm really asking Aman is in relation to the nature of the opposition inside Iran. Who are they orientating towards? There's different wings, obviously. And is there any prospects that the Chinese can be embarrassed into doing a little bit more? Because I'm sure inside Iran, they would have been amazed that the Chinese didn't sort of really assert themselves on that. Unless I'm mistaken, maybe there was heavy censorship of that in my own country, because I don't remember it appearing on that issue ever being discussed in the media in Ireland. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That's very important questions. We've got Comrade Finn next, and then Matthew.
Comrades, I want to begin by thanking Aman for a clear and informative opening contribution, and it will assist a lot in the developing discussion. I want to say that the expression Islamic Republic itself is contradictory. A country can't be a republic and be Islamic simultaneously, because they're contradictory terms. Yet that's been accepted internationally as a description of the regime. It's not a republic, it's an Islamic regime. I wanted to make that opening point. My question relates back actually to something Joe said. It's about the forms of dissent and the forms of disagreement with the government that are beginning to emerge, or have been emerging in recent years in Iran. I'm thinking in particular about the strikes, the very widespread and massive strike movement across Iran in recent years, and the trade union organizations behind that strike movement, which was very positive, and a very, very positive political and social development in the country in recent times. Now, where is that going now? What forms of dissent, what forms of disagreement are now being expressed, particularly with relation to the trade union movement? And then there's a question that emerges historically, which I'd like Aman now to just have a look at. The Iranian Communist Party in the past, the Tudeh, although there's disagreement about its nature as a communist party, but nonetheless, It was a very big organization. It had been built up over years, and its influence was very, very strong in amongst industrial workers in Iran. And then it disappeared, it went off the agenda. Now, what was the process that was underway to enable the party to grow so well amongst the organized working class, particularly in industry, and then to lead the scene? What were the processes that enabled that to happen? And what are the prospects now of other left-wing movements, Joe referred to this as well, emerging in Iran? Because the tradition of struggle for socialism is very strong in Iran. And the Islamic regime came to power by defeating the left-wing forces in Iran. Then, another question which emerges as well is the overthrow of the Iranian regime under Mossadegh by British Petroleum, when the regime nationalized British Petroleum oil interests. Britain in particular, but foreign imperialism intervened to overturn the government and to install over time the regime of Pahlavi and the Shah. So the Shah was an expression of defeat for the government of Iran. So I have a question about that. Is the right-wing opposition, which Aman has been describing internationally, is that part of this new thing about the return of the Shah? That demand has been raised, certainly in the international media, that there is a call somewhere for the... No, I think it's a fantasy. It's not going to happen. It's a ridiculous demand to put, particularly given the Shah's history of torture, imprisonment, and destruction of all opposition forces. But nonetheless, my question is this new talk about getting the Shah to come back, is that part of this right-wing movement that you've been referring to internationally, particularly in response to the Israeli attacks? And finally, what are the principal demands that left-wing forces would now raise in Iran? Because it's a complicated situation. The country has been attacked by American imperialism. Obviously, people are going to resist that. The regime is an undemocratic regime. So what demands would now be the relevant, well, particularly the principal demand that would now be relevant to mobilizing forces against the existing regime and to advance the struggle for socialism in Iran? Because Iran does have that tradition and it can be reactivated. So I'm interested to hear how a man would approach that question with regard to building a left party in Iran in opposition to the regime. Thanks, comrades.
Oh, thank you. Next is Matthew. Matthew, you there?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted here. Yeah, no, thanks, Comrade Aman. It's very interesting, and I think obviously a condition at the moment, in which we see the whole region in the balance. Obviously, the effort to basically by the entirety of imperialism to liquidate the Palestinians effectively, politically, physically, and this is part of it. In those terms, I mean, I think the interesting thing, there's various facets of it. It is the weakness of all sides. I mean, if you look at it, actually, of course, I mean, the US military has signaled over years, actually, ever since its catastrophe in Iraq, that it wasn't prepared to do anything similar to in Iran, because it doesn't have the facility to do it. And it knew it would, the damage would be enormous. And so they, as Aman says, the action was a bare minimum and clearly ordered, by the Trump crew, who of course know nothing, almost deliberately ignorant. And certainly, the level, the degree of leadership in the Pentagon now is risible. I think you can also see, of course, the weakness of the US, of course, in its dealings with both Israel and, of course, Yemen. The fact that the Yemenis, of course, the poorest country in the Arab world, have managed to chase off the US Navy. It's incredible. The fact that obviously there's also, of course, this material weakness they've got in terms of, have they got enough or do they manufacture enough interception missiles? And clearly they're running short on all fronts. I mean, they were actually withdrawing interception missiles from Ukraine to give to Israel. The US Navy, the main reason why the US Navy fled the seas around Yemen, which they wouldn't get within, end up at the point that they wouldn't go within 500 miles of the place, but even at that point, was the fact that they'd actually run out of missiles, which they were then having to send up huge numbers. The minimum sort of version cost $2 million each. And the larger versions and more sophisticated version cost a lot more than that. And they got through over $1 billion worth of missiles, and they just didn't have any more. So there's that weakness in terms of weakness of US imperialism. I think what comrades have said about solidarity action is also to say, look, the point here also is that Israel is completely dependent on the supply of military gear from the US and the other imperialist countries. It wouldn't exist otherwise. And so there's this supply line which is running, which is a long supply line, and actually, of course, is mainly, as I say, mainly the US, and at least it involves at least 1,000 tons of assorted military gear, besides the ammunition. At least 1,000 tons of military gear a month is moved from the US to Israel on ships. Now, the thing is that obviously that the dock workers in places like Spain, France, Morocco, etc., have attempted to stop that and made great, some certainly cases like Spain, France, and of course also in Greece, there has been solidarity action in those terms. Of course, the British unions have distinguished themselves largely, and certainly in their leadership terms, by their imperialism and their the fact that they will not act against this genocide at all. And we saw, you see this in the Unite conference a few days ago, in which a cobbled up executive statement was passed, to make sure that there was no serious debate about Palestine or action against it, and that a statement was produced that allowed the leadership to avoid doing anything at all, and to continue to do that, while maybe occasionally saying something about Palestine, but not actually ever doing anything. In contrast to unions all the way across the world, and particularly in the rest of Europe, and even, as I say, in the likes of Morocco, where dockers have actually walked off the job and been sacked rather than move Israeli stuff. So in those terms, it's a vital question for the working class. Can they actually get the boot on this long supply line? And it's perfectly possible. There's then, of course, the weakness of the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis. This attack on Iran, of course, is an effort, by Netanyahu to get himself out of his political impasse. And he's the deep unpopularity of the war in Gaza, which now 2/3 of Israelis wish to stop. And that it got him the war in Israel, of course, then resulted in a huge amount of damage being done. The war on Iran then resulted in quite considerable amount of damage being done to Israel, because, of course, it didn't have its vaunted air defences didn't work to the degree in which they boast. The main oil refinery was hit. The intelligence headquarters were hit. The main research centre for the military was hit. All this stuff, of course, none of which appears in the imperialist press. It's the same. And this resulted in a total boost in the polls for Netanyahu of a matter of a few days. His unpopularity went down for less than a week. So in those terms, you can see that the crisis, being taken across the whole region, and you see it also, of course, in all the Arab regimes. I mean, the Saudis trying to desperately to face both ways. I mean, the Saudis actually phoned the Iranians and said, "Yeah, well, we'll support you," and of course, they're then doing deals with the Americans and all the rest of it. So the whole thing is up in the air. And as I say, I think. What's been said is then, okay, well, is there any then, the question being posed in terms of what are the demands from the Iranian working class and the organisation of the Iranian working class becomes critical. in those terms. But also, I think also the actual an actual movement in solidarity, which starts to get hold of this damn long supply line. And, because the working class could cut this off. It can be done. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. There's nobody else has their hand up, and I think, Aman, you've got a huge number of questions to answer. So I'm going to call Aman back in now. But of course, after he's replied to those questions, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for more questions. Doesn't have to be long speeches, could be just small points or questions. But Aman, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. But the questions are varied, and I try to be very brief. I think some of them requires explanation further. Let me start by breaking it into two parts. One is with regard to the opposition in Iran, and one is with regard to the issues of the region in terms of the approach of what Israel is doing. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I generally agree with many points that Matthew raised, but there are a couple of points in there. I think we cannot explain the attack of Israel on Gaza, nor can we explain the attack of Israel on Lebanon or today on Iran because of Netanyahu. I do agree with him that Netanyahu got himself in a position where he is actually seeking to avoid any sort of litigations, etc., that are taking place in courts. But there is a policy there, and it cannot be the case that one person, for his own ends, could actually make all those decisions in terms of wars in the region. I think that there are bigger policies in here. But I do agree that Netanyahu is in that position. There is one thing. The question is that the Middle East needs an answer. And we all have seen this, not now, for the past 8 decades. It needs an answer. The situation or the crisis in Middle East focuses on one issue, and that's Palestine. And until that issue is resolved, we're going to see instability and variety of other ways of trying to avoid the issue, which is the core issue, the issue of Palestine. There is no escaping it. And this is going to come back and come back. Israel has provided its answer. Militarism is the answer that Israel is providing. But it is not going to wash, and it's not going to effectively bury the main issue of the Middle East in terms of the real issue of Palestine. And until that issue is resolved, we're going to see further instability in the region. That's on one hand. And all of the reactionary states in the region, whether Islamic Republic, whether Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or whoever else, is banking on this and wanted to continue, not resolve, the same as what Israel doesn't want to have resolved. The Israel option of not resolving it is military, further militarization. But in terms of not resolving it, none of them really have any answer because they don't want to have the issue of Palestine resolved. I think that's one side. In terms of what Finn asked, let me come back to a little bit of the history of it. Finn did mention about Tudor party, etc. In Iran, we had one revolution, and that revolution was for effectively a constitutional revolution. That was failed when the old Shah's father was brought to power. That's the first one. Then we had that constitutional revolution had a huge amount of popular support. That was one. Post that, we had one which was the change of the old land ownership and bring in a huge amount of working class and proletariat, which was done from above by Shah, effectively the Shah that was deposed by him. And this was in 1963. And he brought that in by bringing labor into the cities and growth of the effectively more modern working class of Iran. Before that constitutional revolution, we had a communist party in Iran, which was the very first communist party of Iran. It had a very short life. It had very, very close links with the Bolsheviks, and it was taking part, one of its main leaders took part in the Third International. The working class in Iran at the time was very small. Then, when we come to the time of Mossadegh, which Finn mentions, is the time of another party called Tudeh Party, which is, Tudeh means mass. The Tudeh Party was a party with inclinations towards Russia, not because it was a Marxist or anything else like that. It was part of the movement in Iran that wanted massive industrialization. And he saw industrialization through a state as the answer. And that's why he was pro-Moscow. It wasn't because he was pro-Moscow, then it changed that way, but it was the other way around. And that was the Tudeh Party. And as the polarization was growing in Iran, and as Tudeh Party took part, it actually grew. Then during the time that Mossadegh came in, and after that, that party saw the industrialization further, not through the route that Mossadegh was taking. And it was effectively built into a huge social situation. But then afterwards, it became a party that wanted industrialization in Iran in the main sense of the word. Some of the parties came out of that, including the guerrilla ones like Fedayeen, etc., from the same trend. And they wanted to have a change. And that's the other parties that came. When it came to the 1979 uprising in Iran, the Tudeh Party was in total support of Khomeini. So it became as a party which was aligned as part of the state. It was one of those parties that took part in questioning the political prisoners, in identifying political prisoners, etc. And it was known as effectively an arm, or if you like, part of the Islamic Republic. And then, after a couple of decades, the Islamic Republic pushed them out and did effectively expel them. Very similar to what Mujahideen were expelled, Tudeh Party was expelled. So Tudeh Party was thrown to the opposition. So the position when we say Tudeh Party, if you go to many of the youth in Iran, they don't recognize Tudeh Party as it is. And secondly, when it comes to the policies that it was taking in the working class, was very much on the reformist side. Slight changes, working on the reformist side. It had hands in one of the very early on, in the print workers, for example, in some of the textiles. But at that time that we are talking about back in 1975, etc., even during 1979, the population of Iran was 32 million. Now we have a population of 80 or nearly 90 million. So we have a huge change in terms of the size of the working class. According to Islamic Republic statistics, we're talking roughly about 40 to 50 million working class and its families in Iran. That's the sort of a level we're talking about. So we have a complete different scenario. So Tudeh Party, from that point of view, is not known as a left, is not known as a mass party, is not known as a party within the working class. The situation has changed drastically, especially over the past 5 decades. Tudeh Party is still in touch with the sister parties of the communist parties that you see abroad. That's still there. When it comes to the situation of women, I think there is also one thing else about the opposition in Iran. The Islamic Republic, to a huge extent, coming to power in 1983, when it started effectively its establishment, at that time, what happened was it actually went through a huge suppression. Effectively, in about 3 months, we had just under 100,000 executions. Anybody associated with any ideas of the left was taken and attacked. That's the day we actually know as the establishment of the Islamic Republic being able to enforce itself on the society. What also helped in there was the Iran-Iraq war. What also helped in there was the situation in terms of the position that Khomeini had and all the others. So we have had this. Then the left in Iran changed. Then we had another party, which again, with the splits, we have several others. So what we have is a huge change in terms of the left in Iran. Is the problem that of the left? To a large extent, you could say to some extent. But I think there is one thing bigger. Within the society, left, as a general left, I'm not talking about any individual party, irrespective of what the policies are, etc. The general protests which are taking place in Iran are left-wing. Equality of men and women is left-wing. Abolition of death penalty is left-wing. Forming councils is left-wing. Wanting a decent life, and we decide how we're going to live in a local area and broader, left-wing. A recognition of the rights of individuals, left-wing. These are the things which is associated with the left to a large extent. It's not only just secularism, but further than that, atheism, recognition of anybody having anything they want to have. These are very much left-wing issues. The protest of women that took part in about 2-3 years ago, that protest, to a large extent, I think we could say in general rule that it wasn't a revolution, but it was an upcoming, if you like, protest movement, a massive protest movement that had the issue of the women at its core, and its name effectively was bringing it, because the situation of women in Iran is a huge issue. The issue of women and the issue of the working class are the two issues which have been going on since 1979. They've got a huge amount of, if you like, background to them. Now, both of these movements have been coming on. That protest movement is not in terms of parties or organizations, but very much simply shown by the Islamic Republic being unable to enforce its Islamic covering on women. That's how it showed itself. Literally, that's what happened in the society. That hasn't been pushed back yet. They brought many laws, but they couldn't enforce them. So that's what I'm saying. The protest is going on. This is one area of it. The protest in terms of the working places and in terms of wanting and demand for better conditions, pressure on the bosses, etc., is going on. That is still carried on. That is there as well. So neither of them have diminished. But what has happened? They've taken a dent because of the current situation. That's what is currently the situation that we have. In terms of the question that Joe asked about the issue with regard to China and the situation that we have. In Iran, we have a different understanding of China to a large extent. It's not because of their names or whatever else. The rulers in China, I don't remember exactly who it was at the time, just before the 1979 uprising, came to have a deal with Shah and find any way that they could support it. So during that time, that's one issue. During the time that it was with the Islamic Republic and all of the promises of contracts, etc., that they had given, none of them materialized. That's another one. During this time, everybody is general view, not my view, but general view is that China would be happy so long as the state in Iran or any other state is there so they can do their economic deal. So therefore, they're not going to stand anywhere to do something for the purpose of the people of Iran. That's a general view. It's exactly the same view about Russia. That Russia, at the end of the day, looks after its own, looks after its relation with the US, and decides on its own. It's got nothing to do with people of Iran, and it doesn't support. So there is no popular support for China and Russia. So therefore, there are no popular organizations to actually use that, if you like, in any other way. That whole role within the UN, etc., is left to the Islamic Republic. That's their job. In terms of the situation of how the left has gone, this is an evolving situation. We do have a number of left organizations, variety of names, etc. But one thing which we, at the moment, see is the movement, the general movement, social movement, is quite broad and is getting a strength. It doesn't automatically mean that every one of these parties actually takes the same policy along the way, but they have their internal sectarian problems. That is not the case. We have had some of the left which actually has gone in support of the right-wing opposition. Right-wing oppositions are the ones who don't want a revolution, they want to have change of hands. And the son of Shah is the only spokesperson that they have. Their movement is broader, but their main spokesperson in the West, or at least outside Iran, is the son of the Shah. The issue is that last year, the son of the Shah went to Israel. And this is the first time that anybody officially from Shah's time or the Islamic Republic has traveled to Israel. He went to Israel, he had meetings, and he had pictures on his Instagram with his wife and Netanyahu and his wife. And some say even the idea or the notion of the rise of lion, which was the name of the attack that Israel took on Iran, comes from the same lion which is on the same flag of theirs. And Netanyahu, you could see that they actually did thank in CNN, they did come in and they thanked all of these forces for identifying the possible targets within Iran. And this is the situation of them. So when I'm talking about right wing, in terms of the political figurehead, that's the one. And he called in for people of Iran day after day in the media during this time that there was the war, that come on the streets and overthrow the Islamic Republic. This is your best chance. Exactly the same notions of what Netanyahu was saying. So socially, anybody who thought that there is a possibility of an alternative, and that possibility, if you like, to a large extent, part of it is nostalgia. The Islamic Republic has pushed the situation to such a stage that a lot of people say, what we had was much better. And that is the part that they were actually building on. That melted, literally, socially, it melted. From the point of view of, look at what they are actually doing. They're dancing, they're calling up for us to come to the street and uprise at the time, not because we support the Islamic Republic, but because we are being bombed, and that's crazy. So that's the reason why I said that they are in this position. What are the socialists doing? I think nothing has changed from our routine task. Our routine task is the same as what it was. Our positions during this war was one thing. A, condemn Israel. Israel is actually causing this. It's got nothing to do with the issue of nuclear. That's all excuses. It's got nothing to do with the likeness of people. Netanyahu, on the very first day of the strike on Iran, came on TV, and his last sentence was, Zan Zendegi Azadi, women, life, freedom. That was his last sentence. They were saying that we have come to save you. And this was rejected. Second thing was, across the whole region, it is not because people think Islamic Republic is good, but they recognize it as the only force that is standing to Israel. And that was one of the aims of the Islamic Republic. It was literally the case. I remember while that war was going on, in the march in London, you could see flag of the Islamic Republic, and we saw exactly the same in Paris. It wasn't because people were supporting the Islamic Republic. It was the case that condemnation of Israel was the issue. They were minimal, they were tiny, but I'm saying in the region, they recognize who is going to put a rein on Israel. And this is what Islamic Republic has banked on. They're saying we are the only force that is fighting and showing the, if you like, the inabilities, or if you like, parts of the work of the Israel that doesn't seem to hold. And that was mainly in terms of their attacks and their rockets attack on there. Last but not least, insofar as the general population is concerned, there is one thing, and I think we are being bombarded by this. And this is the same thing which is happening, I think, across many countries. We see it all the time. If you come and you say, I'm against the New World Order, we were told that we are in support of Saddam. If you went and said, look, we are against attacks on Gaza, the idea was you're in support of Hamas. And the same notion is being shown that if you say condemn Israel in this attack, then we are in support of the Islamic Republic. In Iran, there is no support for Islamic Republic. Everybody knows that. There is no support for Islamic Republic. The last two presidents that was in Iran, Mousavi, has written a note. He's actually been under house arrest for several years. He's written a note, and this was a previous president. He's written a note that we need a referendum and we need to have another constitutional assembly to decide on how the country works. So the Islamic Republic in itself is in disarray, obviously. The general population doesn't want the Islamic Republic. But in order to actually make that alternative, to make it to a proper uprising and obviously a change, a major change, then the question comes up is how united in terms of ability of the socialists in terms of their change is that. So I say, why is the Islamic Republic in such a scenario still in power? Because we are not strong enough. That's the main reason. So it is upon us to actually make that change possible. It is not because the Islamic Republic has popular support. It's not because the working class cannot stop it. The question is the level of strength we have, and that strength is a measure of how, or a metric of when the Islamic Republic could fall. And that is on us. So therefore, what is our responsibility? Effectively, to a large extent, this is what are the things that we are working for. We are extending the communication, we're extending the networks, we're extending the places of work and producing ways that we could actually make that more general across different parts. And that is one thing which we have been working on, and that has not ceased during this time. Two, fighting against the right wing. That's a major issue. We don't have to expose the Islamic Republic. There is no need to expose the Islamic Republic in Iran. Our main difficulty is exposure of the right and other alternatives. This is what the polarization in Iran means. And that is again, another issue. That's why I said the melting down of the right wing is a huge bonus from our movement in Iran. It's a big issue, and it has a major impact. The situation now also is that the Islamic Republic is trying to push its way down, and it is using the current scenario. It is difficult at the moment to do a lot of things which we could do before. In Iran, to say, I do not want the Islamic Republic is not a crime. In Iran, to say, I'm a Marxist is not a crime. It hasn't been for the past 10 years or so. The Islamic Republic knows if it wants to do that, it's got to get millions. It's impossible. It recognized that. But one thing which is not allowed, one thing that if I go and I say, I'm a Marxist, and it would be immediate imprisonment and execution, is if I'm organized. Organization is the crime. Their job is to prove that you're organized and you're doing something organizationally. Your ideas, the idea that people do not want the Islamic Republic, you sit in any taxi cab, they start shouting about, well, how bad the situation is. It doesn't matter. Everybody says the Islamic Republic is bad. So our main issue is that organization. That is the bit which I think we're working hard on and we're trying to build, rather than opinion or exposure. In UK, you have to still expose the Labour Party to a large extent. Socialists have to do that. But in Iran, the state is not the issue. The exposure is really not that, is to do it in such a way that you can organize further. And that is where our main concern is focused on now. I tried to explain several points. I don't know how well I tried to summarize them, but I tried to give it an idea. Thank you.
No, you've done that brilliantly, Comrade Aman. That was a crystal clear explanation. The only thing I disagree with you about is I think that the Labour Party is equally unpopular as the Islamic Republic. But all the point, I think it's really, you just shone a brilliant light on the situation, and it reinforces the point that however difficult things are now, for all the reasons you explained, Iran actually could be the flashpoint. It could be the start of a rolling wave of revolution throughout the region and the world, because of the strength of the working class and the political clarity that you've explained. So thank you very much, Aman. It's not necessarily time to finish the meeting. If our other comrades want to come in with questions or points, you're very welcome. Anybody want to speak? Nope. Okay, I think, oh, there, Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing here also, you see, I think that to draw out with this is that the degree of crisis of the imperialist system itself. You know, what we're watching here is the disintegration of the system that, you know, I mean, or a final point, the disintegration of the system that was put together by the Americans in the aftermath of the Second World War. I mean, what they're doing, of course, is to shred the UN that they built themselves, shred international law, shred, you know, all the alliances and so on, you know, because obviously Trump is attacking all sorts of countries in all directions as the Americans seek to an advantage across the world. And I think that, you know, the point being, of course, is it means that it draws out the real question of the need for an international working class revolutionary movement, and obviously the you know, as people have said, I mean, it's that key does not lie with the Russians, who are, you know, basically an oligarchy, you know, who would quite happily and have in the past actually, of course, done deals with the imperialists and were integrated as part of the G8 until they decided that suddenly they needed an enemy and that they actually wanted to chop up Russia by using Ukraine, you know, and all this stuff. An enterprise the CIA had on their wish list since the 50s. And you know, it's the same for the Chinese, and you know, and you could go through all these different regimes. None of them actually have the answer. And the question then becomes, okay, well, what comes next? And of course, what it does, of course, the other thing it does is to expose to the world the nature of these people. You know, I mean, all our politicians are blood-stained, filthy monsters. All of them. You know, look at them. You know, and that's been exposed to billions of people across the world. You know, billions of people support Palestine for that reason, and you know, for the liberation of that section of humanity as the representative of everybody else. You know, as I was saying, if Palestine is, until Palestine is free, none of us are free. You know, and that's quite clear. And I think that, you know, as a comment in terms of Iran, obviously, the depth of crisis of the regime, the fact that, as you said, nobody actually wants the damn thing. But the real problem is, well, is there an alternative? You know, which doesn't involve, you know, the satraps of you know, the imperialists, these sort of, you know, vestiges of the past, like the Shah's son or some bit of some other thing, you know, that nobody can stand the look of either. You know, and I think that really. It points up that question in front of all of humanity. Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, last chance. Any questions? Okay, comrade. Aman, do you want to come back? Oh, sorry.
Question, please.
Yeah, sorry, Jimmy. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble with hand signals there, and apologise the fact that I'm tipping in and out with family arrangements. I don't know whether the question has been asked, but I would ask it just in case it hasn't. Aman, what is the situation with the trade union movement in Iran, particularly with regard to their international affiliations? I know there's a lot of international movements through Europe and through the States, but a lot of them carry baggage in terms of penetration by the CIA and whatever other organizations they use. But I don't have any memory of seeing any trade union or Federation of Unions of Iran showing up on any of them. There's a couple of construction unions operating, construction federations operating across Asia and even down through the islands towards Australia. But again, I'm not aware of any connection at any time or any identification of links with Iran. So I just ask if my lack of knowledge is a reality.
Norma, yes, do you have a question?
Yes, a very short question. Of course, it's a key point, organization against, as you said, Aman, very clear. My question is, which are the, is there inside movement or organization which unify or organize, coordinate, or network some of the important movements or parties which are taking active part in the opposition. And if that is the case, which time schedule you can see for set a biggest opposition, a biggest organization, how we can, in the sense of previous question, we can, in some sense, follow that if there are affiliations, if they are taking part in the international wider movements outside Iran. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. And Bob, yes, your question.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to join you. I've been lucky enough to visit your beautiful country twice, and as a rug dealer buying Persian rugs. And one of the things I do remember was the weavers and the dyers, they employed a huge amount of Afghan families, took them in. So my question is has this removal of Afghans, has it affected industries where you need workers that can come in and have skills that can be used? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any more questions or comments? If not, call back Aman, please, just to make a final point.
Sure. Again, just very briefly, in terms of the organizations of the workers, officially there is one which was that of the bus workers. That was done many years ago during the previous regime. So that has got effectively a recognized position. There was one which was in the sugarcane industries, and that gained its position something about 20 odd years ago. There are, apart from them, the rest of them, we have quite a few of what we have as trade organizations. And these are wider scale, like, for example, that of teachers, that they can actually call a strike across the whole country. We have those of the nurses, and we have in similar format, even we don't have student unions, but you can see bodies of students actually being represented when they actually call for action. In terms of the affiliation, I know that the bus workers have got affiliation with the International Transport Federation. And usually they are the ones who actually send support messages when things go about anything, and they make their positions known. There have been similar things done for a variety of protests. But in terms of their representation outside, the overall body of representation of workers is what is generally referred to as the House of Labour. And that is a hand-picked, effectively group or assembly that is in the parliament as well, is recognized, and that is the one that takes part in the tripart meetings between the employers, the state, and that of the workers. The people who are actually there are effectively handpicked by the Islamic Republic, and the guy who actually is in charge of it has been there for donkey's years. And that is the official version. Even they are the ones who go to Geneva ILO. So there is no recognition of independent trade unions in that sense. Whatever there is in terms of the relation that the workers have enforced on the bosses. That is also true within that of the oil, petrochemicals, which has hundreds of thousands of workers. In terms of the question that was asked about the Afghan workers in Iran, there are, as I said, millions of people from Afghanistan or originated partially or background of Afghanistan in Iran. But the main rug industry, to a large extent, has the holding of the hands of child labor. And that is generally there. Many of the people from Afghanistan are one of the, if you like, the lowest points of the working class from the point of view of exploitation or the extent of exploitation. And that has always been the case. A lot of people from Afghanistan tend to work in, for example, construction industries, etc., and many other similar places. They're one of the poorest paid. They're often the ones who actually are under huge amount of pressure. So the question in terms of the industries as such, if you think about it, it could cover those industries, but to a large extent, they were the cheap labor and the cheapest labor. The unemployed in Iran is quite high, but this is the section of the working class in Iran. And also socially, it has a huge impact. As I said, people who have been there for 20, 30 years, they are part of the society, they're part of civilians. And effectively by doing this, they break in that section of the society. Of the people they have deported, they have deported quite a large number. This includes children, and this includes also making some children orphans because they're taking the parents. So it is hugely devastating across the society in terms of the social strata rather than individual industries. There was one question in terms of parties. There are parties, there are organizations. I belong to one. It's not because there isn't any. Internationally means gathering international support, which I think is one of the things we're doing in here in terms of building that network. In terms of the workers themselves, in terms of what is in Iran as people who actually are in workplaces, there are difficulties. The three people that you mentioned who had gone from France to Iran and they were jailed, they were said to have been trying to talk to some of the people who were teachers, and they said they must have been spies. And not only those teachers were held in prison, but also the three French ones. Now they're actually calling them Mossad agents, and the terms are changed. Anybody who goes from abroad to Iran obviously is facing a potential issue of part of this exchange that the Islamic Republic has been doing in terms of prisoners and swaps. But yeah, there are not only organizations, no voices heard, but they are active. As I said, I'm one of those. And there is one thing which we have, because as I said, organization is a crime. For example, for our party, as far as we are concerned, anybody who agrees with our policies is our member. Or we don't issue cards, or we don't issue membership to them in Iran, obviously for a variety of the obvious reasons. This is where we are at the moment. But I think it is true to say that it's hugely politically changing and evolving. And there are positive points at the moment. Obviously, as I said, we have had a setback, but in this time, there are also issues which are majorly influential and are important at the moment. And perhaps we could discuss that maybe later on, or probably in different situations specifically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kamaraman, I think all of us are really inspired by your contribution, and we're very lucky and very proud that you're part of the WIN network, and we will certainly invite you back very soon to give us an update. Comrades, just about what we're doing next week. When the Iran-Israel war started, we made a decision that we would try to have 3 consecutive meetings where we would hear comrades from the USA, from Iran, and from Israel to explain the situation of the revolutionary movement and the workers' movement in those countries. We had last week comrades Jack and Richard gave us a really fascinating description of the movements of the working class and the resistance to the Trump regime. Today, I don't need to repeat what an inspiration to hear Comrade Aman. Next week, we're very lucky because we managed to get the agreement of a member of parliament in Israel. He's a member of the Hadash-Tal Joint List. They have a block of 5 members of the Knesset, that's MPs, and they're the only left part of the Knesset, and they're the main representative group for that part of the Israeli Palestinian population that still has voting rights. And the bloc opposes the occupation, it opposes the war in Gaza, and it's trying to campaign against it under obviously the most ferocious and heavy repression. And they're very much under attack. The name of the comrade is Ofer Kasif, a member of Hadash, which is really the Communist Party in Israel. And I think it'll be really quite a coup to be able to discuss with him and to hear from him a report. That will be the last WIN meeting for a period, because as usual, we're taking a break over August, being generally a holiday month for comrades in many countries. We'll be starting again in September. So I do hope to see you all next week, and please publicize the meeting, get more comrades along. I think it's going to give us a rare insight into the fact that there is an opposition within Israel, and to hear what they're campaigning for, how they're faring, what kind of obstacles and repression they're facing, and so on. So thank everybody for your attendance and what's been yet another brilliant meeting, I thought. So thanks, comrades.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Roger.
you.
Bye-bye.